Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad. We're going to give Annie the AR, give her a really introduction because I have introduced her. I don't even have a scope. I don't have nothing on here. I haven't given it any attention. I've had it now for a year. I'm just going to run a few rounds through it just to make sure it's still running rounds through. Let's see what we got. Oh yeah, that's probably way off. Ooh, see if we got that target now. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أما بعد أحبتي في الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. A couple of ahadith Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam before we depart for the evening or before we go to bed. And these two ahadith, or these hadithain, are in Sahih Muslim. And the first hadith, and we'll just mention bil ikhtisar, is a hadith of Abu Hurairah. عن أبي هريرة قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا قرأ ابن آدم السجدة فسجد اعتزل الشيطان يبقي يقول يا ويله. In the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala, in which he said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if the son of Adam reads a sajda, Surah Al-Sajda, then he makes sujood. Okay, that this is the ahkam, this is what we should do. That's one of the places in the Quran, min mawdu'at, where we make sujood. I'tazal shaitan. The shaitan, distance himself and kind of refuses and cries. And he said, Ya waylahu, woe unto him. So this shows us, obviously, we know the shaitan is the greatest of kuffar and of those who are the denizens of hell. Jahannam, wa'iyadhan billah wa iyyakum min dhalik. And in the next hadith, and we'll get into the explanation that Imam bin Uthaymeen mentions, is the hadith of Jabir radiyallahu ta'ala يقول سمعت نبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إن بين الرجل وبين الشرك والكفر ترك الصلاة. In this hadith, the hadith of Jabir radiyallahu ta'ala, he said that I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, verily between a man and between polytheism and disbelief is leaving the prayer. This is also in Sahih Muslim. In these two hadith, Imam Muslim, as Imam bin Uthaymeen mentions, Imam Muslim did not give this subject the title that you find in Sahih Muslim, which is Bab Bayan Itlaq Ism al-Kufr ala man tarka salat. And the name of this chapter, the chapter is clarifying that saying the itlaq ism kufr, that's saying that this refers to disbelief, or has the name disbelief for the one who has left the prayer. Meaning bayan al-hukm. This is clarifying the ruling regarding the one who leaves the prayer, and it being referred to as kufr, as disbelief. So Imam Muslim did not make that tarjuma, that title, but Imam Nawawi did. So he says لم يترجم لحديث جابر هذا لكن ترجم له النووي. So Imam al-Nawawi is the one who gave that title in his explanation of Sahih Muslim. بقوله with that title باب بيان إطلاق اسم كفر على من ترك الصلاة. والظاهر كلامه رحمه الله تعالى أنه لا يرى كفر ترك الصلاة. And Ibn Uthaymeen mentions that what seems apparent from this title of this chapter is that Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi did not believe that leaving the prayer is disbelief. So that is what is apparent from this title. And he says, وَإِنَّمَا أَطْلَقَ عَلَيْهِ اسم كفر الذي هو كفر دون كفر. So Imam bin Uthaymeen, he says that Imam al-Nawawi mentioned in his title the term kufr, and what seems apparent is what he means by this is the kufr duna kufr, which means the lesser type of kufr. Okay? So kufr has two types. Kufr al-akbar, kufr al-asghar. The major kufr, kufr al-akbar, and the minor kufr, which is kufr al-asghar. Both of them are major sins, but kufr al-akbar takes you out of the fold of Islam. Kufr al-asghar means you have done this major sin, and it's a less type of kufr, meaning you're still a Muslim, but you fell into this egregious sin, which is the lesser kufr. Then he goes on to state, Ibn Uthaymeen says, the correct view, and there's no doubt about this, is that leaving the prayer, the one who leaves the prayer is a disbeliever. This is the statement of Ibn Uthaymeen. Kharaj min al-millah, that he has left the religion, the fold of the religion. فهو كفر al-akbar. This is the major kufr. And there is a difference, and this is a very important fa'idah that Imam bin Uthaymeen mentions, and I think we should give it its Arabic haqq, its true, it's right in Arabic, and then we'll translate it. He says, وَفَرْقٌ بَيْنَ أَنْ يُقَالْ مَنْ فَعَلَ كَذَا فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. He says, and there's a difference, and I want you to understand this, especially those who are affected by takfir. He says that there is a difference between saying someone has fallen into kufr, meaning doing this action is an action of kufr. And what can clarify that, what Ibn Uthaymeen is saying, which is very clear, is Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah mentions, لَيْسَ كُلُّ مَنْ يَقَعْ فِي الْكُفْرِ تَكُنْ كَافِرٌ وَكَمَا قِيلَ. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he mentions that not everyone who falls into an action or a statement of disbelief is a kafir. Meaning you fell into kufr doesn't make you a kafir automatically. So it's very important for us to understand that, because that has to do with making, especially when people are making rulings on others. Okay, when people are declaring other people to be disbelievers. Oh, he's a kafir, he did this. The leader so-and-so is a kafir, he did this. He showed this trait. He was with these people. He's a disbeliever. So it's very important for us to know and understand not everyone who falls into disbelief is a disbeliever. And there's many reasons a person can fall into disbelief, sometimes by a mistake. Sometimes they can utter a statement of disbelief totally by mistake. Just giving a lecture, and then all of a sudden you say something and you meant something totally different. That happens. You're human. You make mistakes. It's very easy to slip of the tongue. Or out of absent-mindedness or forgetfulness, whatever. There's various reasons for it. So then Ibn Uthaymeen, he mentions, من فعل كذا فهو كافر وبين أن يقال هذا عمل كفر. So he says that there is a distinction, that we have to make a distinction. This is what Ahl Sunnah does, is that there's a distinction between the one saying whoever does this has disbelieved versus saying so-and-so is a disbeliever. Okay? And that also is a difference between something very important that we've talked about over the years many times. And that's the difference in the issue of takfir, which is called takfir al-mu'ayyan versus takfir al-mutlaq. Takfir al-mu'ayyan versus takfir al-mutlaq. Takfir al-mu'ayyan, ahabbati fillah. This refers to the specific takfir, like you're saying so-and-so, he did this, he is a disbeliever. And we've established the proof and all the conditions for takfir. So-and-so is a disbeliever. That's what we call specifying that a particular individual is a disbeliever. That's called takfir al-ma'in. The other classification or type is called takfir mutlaq, the general takfir. So that means a general hukum, maybe not necessarily on an individual. It's like saying whoever deliberately spills coffee on the Quran is a disbeliever. Okay, whoever deliberately spills coffee on the Quran, they pour it. That means they had an intention to do it. That they've disbelieved. Okay, that is a general hukum. We haven't talked about a specific person. We didn't say Fatima, Muhammad, Khalid, Ben, Jeff, and anything else like this. No, we said in general, whoever falls into this has disbelieved. So that's the difference between takfir al-ma'in wa takfir al-mutlaq. Now, and Ben Uthaymeen is making a point to that. Then he goes on to say, he mentions that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about shirk wa kufr in this hadith, showing us the seriousness of it. But he also distinguished all the points we just made. He says, وَقَدْ اسْتَدَلَّ بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ مَنْ يَرَى أَنَّ مَنْ تَرَكَ صَلَاةً وَاحِدَةً فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. So, the other hadith that we mentioned, which is the hadith where that the shaitan, that when the son of Adam recites sajda, that he makes sujood, and the shaitan, distances himself or refuses and separates himself, and he begins to cry. And so some of the scholars, they use that text, that nas, as evidence to support that whoever leaves even one prayer, then he is a disbeliever. And Ben Uthaymeen says, وَلَا شَكْ أَنَّ مَنْ تَرَكَهَا إِسْتِكْبَارًا. And he says, and there's no doubt, there's no doubt about the one who does this out of arrogance. فَإِنَّهُ كَافِرٌ كُفْرُ إِسْتِكْبَارٍ. Because that this person, without a doubt, they are a disbeliever. And they are, because this is the kufr of arrogance. Meaning their kufr, the reason they did what they did, this was out of arrogance. I'm going to refuse to worship Allah. I'm going to refuse to pray out of arrogance. I'm too good. I don't want to get my head dirty. Whatever the case may be, but it's when we're talking about the case of arrogance. Because this is a pure resemblance of shaitan, and the shaitan fell into disbelief because of this. He says, La kufr tahawun, meaning this is not the kufr, the disbelief of laziness, meaning some people leave the prayer due to laziness, and the scholars differ over that. Some say no, even though it's lazy, they're still a disbeliever. Some say no, out of laziness, although it's very sinful, it's a huge sin, major sin, they're still a Muslim, but they are a wicked sinner. Some of the scholars mention that. He says, Wa iblis tark sujood tark istikbar. And this is the case of the shaitan. Is that the reason he left off making sujood when the malaika, the angels, made sujood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Jannah, the iblis, he refused to do so. And this is illustrated in the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, Illa Iblis aba wastakbara wa kana min al-kafirin. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about the shaitan, about Iblis, he says, Illa Iblis, meaning the angels, they prostrated. before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when asked to do so. Before Adam, as Allah commanded them. But the shaitan, Iblis, he refused. Illa Iblis. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that. The exception was Iblis. What did he do? Aba wastakbar. He refused, and he did it arrogantly, out of arrogance. He became arrogant and haughty, and he refused to prostrate. And what does Allah describe and say very clear about the shaitan? Which is a conclusion, for that. وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And he was one of the disbelievers. So the shaitan, his disbelief was due to arrogance. That's what you want to avoid by any and all means necessary. So Imam bin Uthaymeen, he finishes up on this. He says, وَالْحَاصِلُ أن هذا الحديث لا ينبغي إدخاله في هذا الباب على أنه ليس كفر مخرج عن الملة. So bin Uthaymeen, he's of the view, and he's saying that he obviously differs with Imam an-Nawawi and those scholars who say that, who have the same position, but he says that it is not useful or is not useful to enter this hadith in this under this chapter heading, to give the view that leaving the prayer does not take one outside the fold of Islam. He says, Bel innahu makhraj an al-millah. He says, rather, it takes you out of Islam by leaving the prayer. وَأَنَّ مَنْ تَرَكَ صَلَاةَ اسْتِكْبَارٍ فَإِنَّهُ يَكْفُرُ بِتَرْكَ الصَّلَاةِ وَاحِدًا. So bin Uthaymeen, he mentions that the one who, and that's why he's saying, because the hadith that we're talking about, entering this hadith in this chapter, the one about Iblis, talking about the shaitan, he said you shouldn't put this in this chapter, because Iblis left the prayer due to arrogance. And that doesn't, and if you're trying to prove, and this is like his munakisha ilmi with Imam an-Nawawi, if you're trying to prove that leaving the prayer is not disbelief, you shouldn't use this hadith as evidence, because this hadith shows that Iblis, obviously the biggest kafir, and it was due to his leaving the prayer out, making sujood, leaving prostration, and it was due to his arrogance. So that is not a dalil, not an evidence. I hope that's clear what I'm saying, trying to articulate the best I can for us to understand this munakisha ilmi. This is the beauty of Ahl al-Ilm, So he says, "Man taraka salat istikbaran." He says, "فَإِنَّهُ يَكْفُرُ بِتَرْكَ الصَّلَاةِ وَاحِدًا." He says, the one who, out of arrogance, that if they leave the prayer, even if they leave one prayer, then they're a disbeliever. And then what is he going to say? He says, "Bel lo taraka sajda wahida." He says, even if they left off one prostration, they're a disbeliever. Why? Because they did it out of arrogance. That's what he's saying. He says, وَأَمَّا مَنْ تَرَكَهَا تَهَوَّنٍ. He says, as for the case of the one who leaves off the prayer out of laziness, وَكَسْلًا, the one who's kind of careless and the one who's lazy, he says, فَهَذَا مَوْضُوعِ خِلَافٍ. He says, this is the area where there's a difference of opinion, difference between Ahl al-Ilm. He says, وَصَحِيح. He says, the most correct view, though, أَنَّهُ كَافِرٌ كُفْرًا مَخْرَجًا عَنِ الْمِلَّةِ. He says, but the correct view is that even this one, the one who's lazy and stuff, is a disbeliever who has left the fold of Islam, period. So that was a beautiful munakisha by the Imam. May Allah have mercy upon them. And this is some of the fawaid we gain from Ahl al-Ilm. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Almighty to accept our good and forgive our evil, protect us from kulli su wa makruh, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.